My name is Maya, and to the people at Sterling Heights, I am part of the furniture. I wear a gray uniform and carry a yellow bucket. I move through the marble halls of the city's most powerful tech firm like a ghost. The CEOs and directors walk past me, their eyes fixed on their phones, never realizing that I hear every secret they whisper. I wasn't always a cleaner. I have a degree in mathematics from a country that doesn't exist anymore. But here, my credentials are worth less than the soap I use to scrub the floors. I don't mind. Being invisible is a survival skill. But today, the air in the building felt different. It felt like a storm was coming. Killian Thorne was the CEO, but everyone knew he was the head of the Thorne Syndicate. He was a man of cold iron and expensive silk. His office was on the 50th floor, a glass cage that looked down on the world. He was currently screaming at a group of men in suits who looked like they wanted to melt into the carpet. "The encryption is unbreakable," Killian roared, slamming his fist onto a mahogany desk. "If we don't get into that drive by midnight, the feds will have enough evidence to bury us all." I stood in the corner, polishing a brass lamp, keeping my head down. I looked at the whiteboards covered in complex code. To them, it was a wall. To me, it was a poem with a glaring spelling error. I moved closer to the board, pretending to dust the frame. The code was a classic 256-bit AES string, but they were attacking it from the wrong angle. They were looking for a backdoor, but the creator had built a trapdoor function based on prime number sets. "Excuse me, sir?" I whispered, my voice cracking from disuse. Killian stopped mid-sentence. He looked at me like a lion looking at a mouse that had dared to squeak. "What?" he snapped. "The floor is clean, woman. Get out." "The third line," I said, pointing a gloved finger at the board. "The variable isn't a constant. It's a Fibonacci sequence. If you run the algorithm through a recursive loop, the gate will open." The room went silent. Then one of the tech experts, a man named Marcus with a Harvard tie, burst out laughing. "A recursive loop? Listen, sweetheart, we have PhDs from MIT. Go back to your mop before you hurt yourself trying to think." Killian didn't laugh. He stared at me with eyes that could freeze fire. "You're a cleaner, Maya. Stay in your lane." He waved a hand dismissively. I felt a hot sting of humiliation in my chest. I picked up my bucket and walked out. I had tried to save them. If they wanted to walk into the fire, I would let them burn. By 11 p.m., the building was nearly empty. I was on the 48th floor when I heard the sound of breaking glass from above. I took the service elevator up. The experts were gone, likely fleeing before the police arrived. Only Killian was left, sitting in the dark, staring at the glowing red text on his monitor. "Access denied. Final attempt." He looked defeated. His tie was undone and his hair was a mess. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "The feds are downstairs," he said quietly. "In 10 minutes, I lose everything." I didn't say a word. I walked over to the keyboard.
Killian didn't stop me. He watched as my fingers flew across the keys. I didn't use the tools the experts had built. I wrote a new script from scratch. Input, loop, extract. The lines of code scrolled past like a waterfall. I hit the enter key. For 3 seconds, the screen stayed black. Then a soft chime filled the room. The red text turned green. Access granted. Every file, every ledger, and every secret was suddenly laid bare. Killian stood up, his mouth hanging open. "How?" he breathed. "I told you," I said, picking up my mop. It was a Fibonacci sequence. Killian grabbed his external drive and began dumping the data. He worked with a frantic energy I had never seen. Just as the progress bar hit 100%, the heavy oak doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the room, guns drawn. "Killian Thorne, you're under investigation for..." The lead agent started, but he stopped when he saw the screen. It was empty. The drive was wiped. Killian was calmly sipping a glass of scotch, while I was casually wiping down a window. "Investigate all you want, agent," Killian said with a smirk. "But as you can see, we're just doing some late-night spring cleaning." I was waiting to be fired for touching his computer. Instead, he pulled out a checkbook. That Marcus guy, he was paid $200,000 a year to fail, Killian said. He wrote a number on the check and slid it across the desk. It was for $50,000. That's for tonight. Now, tell me who you really are. I'm the person you told to stay in her lane, I replied, leaving the check on the desk. I don't want your money, Mr. Thorne. I want a job where I don't have to wear a gray uniform. The next Monday, the office was in an uproar. Marcus and his team had been fired and blacklisted. A new chief information officer was arriving. Everyone expected a high-powered executive from Silicon Valley. When I walked through the front doors, I wasn't carrying a bucket. I was wearing a charcoal-colored power suit. My hair, which had always been tied back in a messy bun, was styled perfectly. The security guard, who had ignored me for 3 years, blinked in confusion. Maya, he whispered. I didn't answer. I headed straight for the private elevator. The remaining directors were horrified. A cleaner? One of them hissed. Killian, this is a joke. Our investors will pull out if they find out a janitor is handling our security. Killian leaned back in his chair. She didn't just handle the security. She saved the syndicate. While you were all packing your bags to run, she stayed and solved a problem your experts couldn't even understand. He looked at me. Maya, the floor is yours. Clean it up.
I didn't waste time. I opened my laptop and projected a map of our internal network. The reason you were almost caught wasn't because the feds are smart, I said. It's because you have a mole. Someone in this room has been feeding data to the authorities for months. I hit a key and a series of encrypted emails appeared on the screen. They were traced back to the director of finance, the very man who had just called me a janitor. His face turned the color of ash. I can explain, he stuttered. Killian didn't give him a chance to explain. He signaled to his associates at the door. As the director was let out, I continued my presentation. I've rebuilt the firewall. I've encrypted the payroll poll. And I found $3 million in lost revenue that was being funneled into offshore accounts. The other directors sat in stunned silence. They realized that the invisible woman had been watching them for a long time. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one who had to clean the floors after the burials. Killian and I walked to the balcony after the meeting. The city lights were twinkling like fallen stars. You're dangerous, Maya, he said, but there was a hint of admiration in his voice. You see everything. That's the problem with people at the top, Killian, I said. You're so busy looking at the sky that you never notice the people at your feet. But the people at your feet see everything. We see the dirt you try to hide. We see the cracks in your foundation. But being the CIO of a mafia-linked firm came with targets. A rival syndicate, the Faustos, didn't like that Thorne's security had become impenetrable. They decided to remove the person responsible. One evening, my car was forced off the road by 2 black sedans. I wasn't afraid. I had spent years being invisible. I knew how to disappear. I slipped out of the passenger door and into the shadows of a nearby construction site before the gunman even reached my car. I used the environment against them. I tripped the electrical breakers, plunging the site into total darkness. I used a heavy wrench to knock out the first man. By the time the second man found me, I was holding his own weapon. Tell Mr. Fausto, I whispered in his ear, that if he touches my car again, I will wipe his bank accounts before he can blink. I didn't kill them. I sent them back to Fausto with a message. But more importantly, I hacked Fausto's personal phone. The next morning, every billboard in the city displayed Fausto's private browsing history and his secret offshore tax records. He was ruined in a single hour. He didn't lose his life. He lost his reputation, which in the mafia is a death sentence. Killian called me into his office, laughing. You didn't even use a bullet, he said. I'm starting to think you're more ruthless than I am. Killian and I became an unstoppable team. He handled the muscle, I handled the mind. We turned the syndicate into a legitimate global empire. We built schools in the neighborhoods we used to ignore. We hired people who had worthless degrees and gave them a chance. But Killian was changing. He wasn't the lion anymore. He started listening. He started seeing the people he used to walk past. He even started carrying his own coffee. One day, Marcus, the MIT expert who had mocked me, showed up at the front desk. He looked terrible. He was broke and desperate for a job. He didn't recognize me in my suit. I'm here to see the CIO, he told the secretary. I have a PhD. I'm overqualified for anything you have. I walked into the lobby. Marcus looked at me, his eyes widening. You're the cleaner. I was the cleaner, Marcus, I said, and I'm still cleaning. Only now I'm cleaning out the trash that thinks a degree is a substitute for a soul. You can leave now.
I never forgot where I came from. Every Friday, I would go down to the basement and have lunch with the cleaning staff. They were my eyes and ears. They told me which directors were stealing and which managers were bullying their staff. I became the guardian of the invisible. If anyone mistreated a cleaner or a security guard, they had to answer to me, and answering to me meant answering to Killian Thorne.
As the years passed, Killian decided to step down. He wanted to retire to a quiet life. He called me into his office one last time. "The company is yours, Maya. I'm transferring my shares to you." "Why?" I asked. "I'm just a girl from the street." "No," Killian said, looking at the city he no longer needed to own. "You're the person who saw the world for what it was, not what you wanted it to be. You're the one who knew that a Fibonacci sequence could save a life. You're the real king here." I sat in the big chair on the 50th floor. I didn't feel like a CEO. I felt like a mathematician who had finally found the right equation. I looked at the whiteboard. It was empty now, waiting for a new problem to solve. I realized that my journey wasn't about moving from the basement to the penthouse. It was about bringing the basement with me. It was about making sure that no one in my building was ever invisible again. A new cleaner was working in my office that day. She was young, nervous, and kept her head down. She accidentally knocked over a vase. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she cried, reaching for the shards. I stood up and helped her pick up the glass. "It's just a vase," I said gently. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Well, Sarah, tell me, do you see anything on that whiteboard that looks wrong to you?" Sarah looked at the board, then at me. A small smile played on her lips. "Actually, the third line of that algorithm, it's missing a decimal point. It won't balance." I smiled back. "I thought so too. Why don't you put down the mop, Sarah? We have some work to do." The Thorne Empire became a beacon of change. We proved that power doesn't have to be cruel. We proved that the most important person in the room isn't always the one in the suit. Killian visited me sometimes. He looked happy. He had finally found peace. "How's the cleaning going?" he'd ask with a wink. "The floors are spotless," I'd say, "and the secrets are safe." I look out at the city every night. I see the rain hitting the glass, just like the night I saved Killian. I realize that every person walking down there has a story. Every person has a gift that the world is too busy to see. I am Maya. I am a mathematician. I am a CEO. But in my heart, I will always be the girl with the yellow bucket, the one who knew that if you want to understand the machine, you have to talk to the people who keep it running.